Hello, and thank you for joining Liberty Home Choices to go over some of our quality assurance trainings for 2024. As always, my name is Pascal Valet. I'm the manager of quality management at Liberty Home Choices, and I'm going to be walking you some of these slides today. As always, we know how seriously you take your work here and how busy you are, so we do not take asking for your time lightly. So we've decided to take the most important quality management information that we can, deliver it to you so that you feel confident that we are providing exactly what we promise. In this training, we will be going over how to identify and report critical incidents. In this training, we will be mentioning things such as physical and sexual abuse, exploitation. If you have sensitivities, life experiences around any of these topics, please take care of yourself and make sure that you support yourself during and after reviewing this training. After this training, we want to make sure that you are able to define what an incident is, to know mandatory reporting requirements and procedures, able to recognize signs of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of consumers, how to define and understand risks associated with restrictive interventions, and understand how you can support consumers. I'd like to share some facts with you just to hammer home that this is a serious issue that affects so many people with disabilities. Children with a disability are up to 10 times more likely to be abused than non-disabled children. Women are 3 times as likely to be abused than non-disabled women. The vast majority of disabled women will be sexually assaulted within their lifetime, and men with a disability are abused at a far higher rate than non-disabled men, particularly men and boys who have developmental disabilities and deafness. Among people with disabilities who say they have been the victims of abuse, slightly over a third have actually reported it to authorities. There are a lot of reasons why a victim of abuse might not want to report. A lot of people say they believe that nothing is going to happen afterwards, and it's a futile effort. They fear retaliation, or they might not have any information on how to go about reporting. And unfortunately, it is likely that the perpetrator of this abuse will be someone that the victim knows. So let's start with their definitions. What is an incident? An incident could be any number of things, ranging from hospitalization, injury, or the natural death of a consumer. Could be provider or staff misconduct, neglect of a consumer, exploitation, confrontation, something that causes an interruption of service or causes a crisis, an illness, injury, or a medical emergency in the workplace, or if someone falls or there's evidence of that they were struck on the surface of their body. Something that's even worse than an incident might be considered a critical incident. Critical incidents are included but not limited to accidents or falls that may be life-threatening, if a consumer has trouble breathing, signs of stroke, heart attack, or heat stroke, loss of consciousness, choking, or if you are actually a witness to physical or sexual abuse. Other examples of a critical incident are if you or the consumer is in immediate danger, if there's a burglary or a fire, if there was a medication error that required medical intervention, or if there was a death of a consumer other than by natural causes. So the natural death of a consumer would be an incident. Death by unnatural causes would be a critical incident. So when we say a critical incident is if you have witnessed an act of abuse, this is what we mean. An act of abuse is the infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, punishment, mental anguish, sexual abuse, or exploitation. This includes but is not limited to physical or sexual abuse. When we say neglect of a consumer, we mean the failure to provide reasonable care that an individual requires, including but not limited to access to food, clothing, shelter, medical care, personal hygiene, and protection from harm. So if you fail to provide a consumer with personal hygiene or medical care, that would be considered neglect of a consumer, and that is a critical incident. Exploitation involves depriving, defrauding, or otherwise obtaining personal property in an unjust or cruel manner against one's will or without one's consent or knowledge. So if a direct care worker is keeping a consumer from their cell phone without the consumer's consent, knowledge, or will, that is exploitation. And finally, provider or staff misconduct is the deliberate, willful, unlawful, or dishonest activities. If you experience or witness a critical incident, you must do the following. First and foremost, ensure your personal safety. Once you feel that you are safe, call 911 and report the incident. Once 911 is contacted, you will contact me, Pascal Valet at Liberty Home Choices. My email and phone number is on the screen. I'm Pascal Valet at libertyresources.org, and my phone number is 215-634-2000, extension 498. Some incidents may not be critical, but must be reported for tracking purposes. These include, but are not limited to, any complaints of your consumer being abused in any way, whether it's confirmed or not, meaning verbal, psychological, physical, sexual, any scheduled hospitalizations, the natural death of a consumer, minor injuries, or anything that can create an unsafe living or working environment for yourself or the consumer, including broken assisted devices that compromise an entrance or gas leaks. Now, if the consumer chooses to remain in a compromising or unsafe situation, we have to respect their choice. They are full-grown adults with agency and autonomy, and we cannot decide what is best for them and force them to do that. Our responsibility is to keep the consumer informed of their options, let the consumer know that you are support, and inform them of your role and what you are mandated to report when you see it. Next, we're going to go over a little bit on the two state laws that require mandated reporting. The first law that we're going to talk about is Act 28 about mandated reporting. Any Liberty employee that discovers or has reasonable cause to believe a consumer suffered a bodily injury by a caretaker must report to local police immediately. Reasonable cause to believe. That means it does not have to be absolutely confirmed for you to report. We are all mandatory reporters. And what does caretaker mean? A caretaker is anyone paid to provide care in the consumer's home. The other law that we want you to be aware of is Act 70, Adult Protective Services Act. This was passed in 2010. Act 70 was passed to provide protective services to adults who were older than children but younger than the elderly. Prior to this time, there was no legal authority to investigate causes of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or abandonment of people with disabilities in this age range. Now, the Department of Human Services is responsible to implement the program, but we are responsible to inform you about it. According to the Adult Protective Services Act, an employee or administrator of a facility that has any reason to suspect that someone might be a victim of abuse or neglect will make a verbal report to local Adult Protective Services agency. If an employee of that facility is alleged to have committed abuse, the facility will immediately suspend the employee or, if appropriate, create a plan of supervision if that is approved by the APS agency and any state licensing agencies. In case I have made myself in any way unclear, you must report. Abuse, neglect, exploitation, abandonment are unacceptable. You, as a Liberty employee, are mandated to report. Abuse can mean more than one thing. There are multiple types of abuse, including physical, verbal, sexual, exploitation, abandonment, violation of autonomy, and neglect. All of these have to be reported. I'm going to go over some examples of all those types of abuses. Again, as a reminder, please care for yourself as we are going over these types of abuse. These are hard to hear. Physical abuse is the intent to cause pain, injury, suffering, or bodily harm. Examples could be rough handling, scratching, slapping, putting in bathwater that is too hot or too cold, hitting with or without objects, forcibly grabbing, pinching, anything that causes physical harm. Verbal abuse tends to inflict emotional harm. This could include yelling or screaming at a consumer. It's inappropriate. Making threats to harm, putting someone down, calling someone names, or saying negative things about someone's disability. Sexual abuse is, of course, any forced or undesired sexual behavior. This includes unwanted kissing, fondling, or other sexual contact, exposing yourself to the consumer, watching the consumer as they undress without their consent, saying sexually suggestive statements, and using that position of trust to compel otherwise unwanted sexual activity. These are all examples of sexual abuse. Exploitation includes doing things in an unwanted manner, such as stealing money, credit cards, stealing their medication. That's exploitation. Stealing other belongings, gossiping about your consumer, sharing personal health information, blackmailing, manipulating timesheets for hours not worked. That is a form of exploitation, as is going through one's personal items without their permission. Abandonment includes if they have been deserted at a hospital, a nursing facility, or another institution, if they've been deserted at a shopping center or public space, or if they even just say they report that they have been abandoned. That is something that has to be reported and taken seriously. Violation of autonomy is something else that needs to be taken quite seriously, and this is denying independent choice and freedom, which is something that liberty is all about, supporting independent choice and freedom. So examples of violation of autonomy include pressuring the consumer to go to bed early so that the caregiver can leave, controlling the consumer's mobility devices or taking away their mobility devices or other equipment, or denying access to personal records such as their bank statements, Social Security, or service plan. Denying all of these things are included under violation of autonomy. Next, we'll be going over neglect. Now, neglect can manifest as doing something or as not doing something. That means that neglect can be either passive or active. Here are some examples of what neglect can look like. Failure to care for or attend to something, such as failing to conduct services on the service plan, failing to supply medication at the appropriate times, ignoring needs, whether that be cleaning up accidents, changing wound dressing, or feeling like you want to skip the exercises that the consumer wants to do. Ignoring those needs is neglect. Starving a consumer, showing up late, leaving early, or not showing up for work without informing a consumer is neglect, as is ignoring requests for assistance. All of these, if seen, have to be reported. As we went over at the beginning of this presentation, there are going to be participants or consumers who may not want to report for any number of reasons. A lot of people don't know how to report. They don't know the pathway, so hopefully this training can provide a little more insight into that. Of course, other reasons may include fear of retaliation, fear of institutionalization, meaning if I report my direct care worker for neglect or abuse, does this mean that I'm going to get put in a nursing home? Or they might have low self-esteem. They may not be able to think that they deserve much better. And of course they do. Liberty's mandatory reporting procedures include all Liberty employees. LRI will follow all mandatory reporting procedures, and all personal attendant service agencies must follow Act 28 and Act 40 reporting procedures. What if you witness something or a consumer tells you about something and it doesn't fall into any of the categories we've discussed? What do you do? If you're ever uncertain if an incident is worthy of being reported, it is best practice to report it to the quality management team. You can do so by calling me, again, Pascal Valet. My phone number is 215-634-2000, extension 498, or we have the after hours phone number 267-765-1550. When you're reporting a potential abusive incident, there are going to be a few pieces of information that we are going to ask from you. First, who was involved in the incident? What led you to believe an incident occurred? Where and when did the incident take place? And how was the incident able to occur? And is there anyone else who can corroborate with what you're reporting? When we receive a complaint, the quality assurance team will follow up on the report and create any additional actions taken to resolve the complaint, including steps put in place to avoid reoccurrence, as well as note the consumer satisfaction with the resolution. For staff members who don't use HHA or EIM, an email should be sent to me, again, Pascal Valet at libertyresources.org. We will do the normal follow-up and create the documented event in HHA. In all cases, the QA team will investigate and take the follow-up steps regarding any required reporting triggered by the complaint. These steps will combine those set out above for HHA users and quality assurance follow-up. And once you report an incident, it doesn't just sit in isolation. The quality assurance team, at least quarterly, is going to review all of the grievances and complaints that are submitted and look at type and frequency of these complaints, as well as the resolutions and consumer satisfaction of the resolutions. We expect that all LHC staff will adhere to these policies with oversight from their managers, and the QM team is responsible for gathering and representing quarterly reports and audits of information related to this policy. Thank you for taking the time to review this information about reporting critical incidences, what qualifies as a critical incident, and what happens when you report it. Again, my name is Pascal Valet. I am Manager of Quality Management at LHC, and on the screen you'll find my email address and my phone number should you have any questions or should you have need to report a critical incident. Thank you again.